Hi, welcome to the third part of Method and Drills in the Theory of Teaching Methodology series. In the first two parts, I talked about why it is necessary to progress within a lesson, a training cycle, and in general, your life as a grappler. And then I talked about how we can modulate different drills to make them games drills or different types of sparrings. And now I would like to show you why this is important for your students to actually learn how to deal with drills themselves and how to modulate themselves so that they can actually learn to learn. Because in the end, you don't want to be the only source of information your students have. You want them to be able to find new techniques at seminars or by buying instructionals, maybe even on YouTube, and then implement these things they get to know in their training and actually test them themselves. And by that, finding out whether it's something they would like to include into their game or not. So you would want to make your students into capable learners. So usually I already talked about the structure of a lesson, and that the drilling portion in the middle is kind of the meat and potatoes of each lesson. You should show your students how it's done, so to speak, by instructing them properly, and they should, by reaching an intermediate stage, somewhere maybe around blue beltish, up to purple, and the darker ranks, so to speak, they should be able to use this structure themselves. So you should no longer have to instruct them on each and every drill. They should be able to learn how to actually modify drills in a way that they are most beneficial to themselves. So in the first two videos, I explained which factors there are in a drill that you can modify, where you can increase and decrease certain aspects of a drill to make it more or less difficult, and to focus it more on one specific aspect, or to open it up to rather focus it on the application of techniques and concepts. And you have to make your students aware of these different factors and also teach them how to use these factors themselves to decide whether they can actually start to pick up the speed while drilling, or if they can actually add another aspect to increase complexity, for example. By that, you're developing the last part or the last skill set that I have not talked in detail about. We talked about what grappling skills and what knowledge is, and how we can actually improve these skills and acquire knowledge over a certain time frame, like a training cycle or a lesson. But for long-term development, it's very important to have also learning skills and skills how to deal with different methods. These are the things that people need to actually improve independently and in directions that maybe you as an instructor are not really comfortable with teaching. Like when you're not very good at leg locking and your students would like to get to know more about leg locks, then you can either go look it up yourself, teach it yourself, and then teach it to your students, or you can refer them to very popular instructionals where they learn the techniques and the concepts, and then you simply provide the space and time and training partners for them to explore that area themselves. Um, Usually that's something that you do with intermediate and advanced students, as they need some technical proficiency before they can actually judge whether a technique is um, worthy to be learned and how to actually break things down. But that's your job. It's your job as an instructor to make students or to help students progress from not knowing what's going on, this unconscious incompetence, to through all the different stages, especially to the conscious incompetence and conscious competence stage that I talked about in the last videos. Because you want them to develop their own game that fits their physical abilities. You don't want to make small clones of yourselves and your game. You want them to be able to do their own thing. That's where they turn from beginners to intermediate and advanced students. So this is one of the aspects that is most of the time lacking in lessons that I have seen in different academies, that people do not really teach their students how to learn themselves. I guess this is one of the major aspects that also makes people quit after a certain time, if they are not taught to actually improve their own game and add to their own game, and they always rely on a coach or instructor to do that for them, so to speak, so that they only have to repeat what has been was being spoon-fed to them. Then they may drop out because they don't know what to do next. They don't see any goals that they can achieve. Maybe they don't see that they progress in any way or how they could progress any further. So this is very important. And it's also important if you have students who are at the same level as you are, maybe, that they actually know how to progress themselves even without your help. Even if you don't know any very specific details about certain leg locks, you can still make sure that they can actually learn it by providing them with the necessary skills and time and place. So you kind of have to practice what you preach, because you break positions down into isolated parts. You teach these parts, then you teach people how to troubleshoot, that's where they get feedback either from you or their training partners, how to adapt. So this is this circle or spiral of a curriculum where people keep on improving on certain aspects, getting to know new technique and concepts and how to apply them more and more proficiently. And by doing this and going through this process in your lessons, students can actually understand and learn how to do this themselves. At the beginning, they need lots of guidance. You have to tell them, now improve the speed, increase the speed at which you're doing the technique. Now your partner gives you this reaction and you have to counter it by doing X, Y, and Z. And so you kind of guide them through the process of learning. You help them with each step so that they can struggle, yes, but they should also enjoy the struggle and learn to enjoy the struggle. So you teach them how to drill by going through the different factors and explaining them telling them which factor they have to modulate in which way for a specific drill. And by doing that themselves, or by seeing how you do it in a lesson, they then can learn to modify it themselves while drilling. So at the beginning, you might tell them, okay, now do not only react with going left, but also react with going right. And now you have to change from sweeping left to right and left and right, so you increase complexity. Then you might say, okay, now your partner is not going to tell you which direction he is going to move. You have him in some open guard, and your partner on top is going to give you certain movements, certain directions, and you have to deal with them and decide which sweep you would like to apply or which submission you're going for. Then you might increase the speed, but by increasing the speed, you should then maybe first take one step back so that directions are no longer random. You know what's going to come. So this is where you would do something like a log flow or sequential learning, so to speak, where you just increase the speed to then again add later the randomness, so that you then have a higher level of complexity, a higher level of external pacing, and also a higher level of external influence. And so you can build up by sometimes taking a step back to then go 2 steps into the right direction towards the goal of the lesson, the training cycle, or whatever time frame you're working in. So you as a coach have to demonstrate how you can combine the different factors when drilling, how to modulate them, that you do not have to go from 0 to 100 for each factor, that you can also go, okay, now we increase the speed by maybe 50% or 250 or 60%, but we reduce the different choices you can make. So you reduce the complexity just a little bit. Instead of giving 4 choices, you have 2 choices, so that you can regulate all the different factors at the same time in the end, depending on where you struggle and where you see your students struggle. If they do not struggle with getting the correct grips, but they then struggle with where do I go, left, right, where do I go, you should give them less options. For example, maybe with the sweep you have one to the front, one to the back, one to the left, one to the right, and they struggle with deciding which direction they should go, then just give them 2 directions, front and back. Then give them 2 directions, left, right. Then maybe you add left, right, front. Then you have maybe front, back, right. And then you add the 4th, and then you have all the 4 options, and they can build towards deciding which one to go for, or even without being conscious about what they're doing, still deciding subconsciously for the correct sweep in the correct at the correct time. So you have to make them aware of these factors. You have to put them into context by teaching concepts or techniques to them. You have to explain why you're taking reduce the complexity to increase the speed or the intensity, so that you don't have to do it all the time, but from time to time you should do it. So simply that they know why they are doing the drill differently now, and why you are modifying in that way at that moment. So you can say, okay, now I see you struggle with getting to the right grips. So we take down the speed or external pacing. So you decide which speed you go at, get the grips correct, and then increase the speed, and then you add resistance and so on, and complexity and so on and so forth. So show them all the modifications, and then let them play around with them, experience in how far modulating these different factors feel different when they drill, and how they can focus on certain skills or the application of knowledge in certain areas by modulating these factors according to the goal. Make them or let them fail, as mistakes are a crucial part of the learning process. When they're intermediate, they should then try to modulate their drilling maybe themselves. You don't tell them, okay, now drill 1 minute like this, 1 minute like that, 1 minute like that. But you go, okay, now you have 10 minutes to drill this. You decide yourselves which factors you're going to modulate in which way. Maybe then watch them for 10 minutes. Maybe after 1 minute they go full force sparring mode and open it up and end up rolling 8 minutes around in, I don't know, back mount, but the topic of the day was half guard sweeps. Then you have to give them feedback again. and tell them, okay, now I gave you some time to drill. You should have drilled half guard, but whenever I looked at you, you were fooling around in back mount. That was not what I intended you to do. So there you have to give feedback, not on technique or on a certain movement, but there you have to give feedback on their learning process. So when drilling techniques and concepts, you give them problems that they can solve. Like I talked about in the learning objective video, that should be a problem that they can actually solve within a given time frame. For intermediate and advanced students, the time frames can be much longer as they already know what they're in for. And the problems can be more complex so that they then have actually to decide, okay, which way would I like to address this problem? How am I going to break it down into smaller, easier to digest and deal with problems and pieces to then put it back together, drill certain aspects of it, maybe go visit a seminar, look at instructionals to get additional information on concepts and techniques which I can apply to that problem, to then solve the problem myself, maybe with the help of others, but I did it myself. I improved my own game. So by that they feel this sense of accomplishment, which is one that is very, very, very important in teaching. Because if they accomplish solving the problem themselves and they did it by actually finding a way to solve it themselves and going that way and modulating that way, so that they, whenever they encounter a new problem, they have to come up with new solutions. They do struggle, yes, but they know that you as a teacher are there to help them with certain aspects without giving them the solution. Maybe sometimes you have to give them the solution, especially when they are starting with this. So simply that they are that their motivation is kept at a high level, so that they are not frustrated. But the more experienced people are, the less you should be giving them solutions right away. Give them a hint. Maybe give them one detail that they need. But do not give them all the solutions at the same time, because then they are again spoon-fed the information. They do not learn how to learn and how to actually understand things themselves, and how to improve themselves by planning on doing so. And for me, this is again one of the aspects that is most important for students to enjoy the journey to become a good grappler, because when they reach that intermediate stage, they need to take charge of be in charge of their own learning process. And the more advanced they are, the more they have to do that themselves and be aware of this this part of becoming a grappler, that it is not only about learning techniques and concepts and applying these, but it's also about being in charge of your own learning process. Yeah, that leaves me with just one video in this series where I want to show the fundamentals of teaching and methodology, where I will address common problems when teaching and how to solve them. Because again, when you are the one who's always handing out solutions, you kind of put yourself on the spot. If you do this progressive drilling and you have this task-based learning structure where people have to solve problems themselves, you often get a chance to have more time to think about maybe problems or questions that people have when drilling or within a lesson, which is sometimes intimidating for new instructors or people who are doing their first steps by teaching class at a club or in a gym. And if you plan your things or your lessons correctly, and you apply this general structure of a lesson, there should not be any question or problem that people run into that is intimidating to you. And I will show you why that is in the last video of this series. See you next time.